My phone rang at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember because I had just turned off the lamp on my nightstand and was lying there in the dark, listening to the rain come down outside my bedroom window the way it does in late October in Ohio, steady, cold, without any particular urgency. I almost didn't pick up. Then I saw it was my daughter. Mom. That was all she said. Just that one word, but I knew. I've known that voice since the first time I heard it, 31 years ago in a delivery room at Riverside Methodist. I sat up and turned the lamp back on. Where are you? The parking garage, at the hospital. I got off my shift and I went to my car and I just... She stopped. I could hear her breathing. I can't drive. I don't know where to go. Stay there, I said. I was already out of bed. I knew she had worked a double. She was a physical therapist at Mount Carmel, had been for 6 years. She was good at it, the kind of person who remembered her patients' grandchildren's names and brought in homemade lemon bars on discharge days. She loved that job, but that wasn't why she was crying in a parking garage at midnight. Is the baby with you? I asked. Yes, she's in her car seat. She's asleep. Okay, I'm coming. I didn't ask any more questions. I put on my shoes, grabbed my coat off the hook by the back door, and drove the 20 minutes to Mount Carmel in the rain. I'd made that drive 100 times, visiting her after her knee surgery, bringing food when the baby was born, picking her up when her car was in the shop. But this time was different, and I knew it even before I knew anything. She was parked on the 3rd level. I saw her through the windshield before I even pulled into the space next to her, her head back against the headrest, eyes closed, hands flat on her thighs the way she does when she's trying to hold herself together. I got out and knocked on her window, and she startled like she'd forgotten I was coming. I climbed into the passenger seat. In the back, my granddaughter slept in her car seat with her fists curled up near her ears the way babies do, like tiny boxers. She was 14 months old, completely unaware that her world had just been rearranged. My daughter looked at me and then she looked away, out at the concrete wall of the parking garage, and she said, "He changed the locks." I didn't say anything. I waited. I got off my shift and I called to tell him I was on my way, and he said, "Don't bother." He said he changed the locks and my things would be on the porch by Thursday, and I should figure out somewhere else to stay. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. And then his father called me. 20 minutes later, his father called me to tell me my position had been eliminated. There it was. Her husband, I'll call him my son-in-law, though that title was about to expire, worked at his father's company, a logistics and warehousing business his father had built up over about 15 years, 4 facilities total, the main one out in Westerville. My daughter had worked there part-time in the office for 3 years, handling client accounts and invoicing, keeping things organized while she also worked at the hospital. She was meticulous, the kind of employee who caught other people's mistakes without being asked and fixed them without making a scene. His father had called her hard-working to her face more times than I could count. He told her at Christmas 2 years ago that she was better at managing accounts than anyone he'd ever hired. And now, apparently, her position had been eliminated. I looked at my granddaughter sleeping in the back seat. "Come home with me tonight," I said. "Mom, just tonight? We can figure everything else out tomorrow. Come home." She followed me in her car. I made up the guest room and brought in the pack and play from the hall closet and set it up next to the bed without turning on the overhead light, moving by the glow from the hallway. My daughter stood in the doorway holding the baby and watched me. When I was done, she laid the baby down without waking her, and then she sat on the edge of the bed, and I sat next to her, and we stayed like that for a while without talking. Eventually she told me the rest of it, or as much as she knew. There had been problems for months. Her husband had been distant, irritable, coming home late or not at all. She'd thought it was stress. His father's business had been struggling with some kind of contract dispute, and her husband managed operations for the Westerville facility, and the whole family had been tense. She'd tried not to ask too many questions. She'd tried to be patient, but 2 weeks before that night, she'd found something. She'd been organizing files on the home computer. They shared one in the office off the living room, and she'd found a folder she didn't recognize. Inside were loan documents. Personal loan documents. 3 of them all taken out in the past 18 months. 2 of them with her name on them. She hadn't said anything yet. She'd taken photos of the documents with her phone and closed the folder and gone back to folding laundry and making dinner and going to work and pretending she hadn't seen what she'd seen. Because she didn't know what it meant yet, and she was scared to find out. I knew what it meant. I've been a certified public accountant for 34 years. I retired 3 years ago, but the knowledge doesn't retire with you. I knew exactly what it looked like when I looked at those photos on her phone at 1 a.m. in my guest room while my granddaughter slept 6 feet away. Someone had used my daughter's name and credit to borrow money she'd never agreed to borrow. I didn't say that yet. I just told her to get some sleep, and we'd talk in the morning. I went back to my room and lay down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling for a long time. In the morning I made coffee and scrambled eggs and let my granddaughter smear banana across her high chair tray, while my daughter sat at the kitchen table wrapped in one of my old cardigans and stared out the window at the backyard. The maple tree out there was bare. October had stripped it. "Tell me everything you know about the business," I said. So she did. Over the next 2 hours, while the baby went from the high chair to the floor with a set of measuring cups I gave her to clank together, my daughter told me everything she knew about her father-in-law's operation. 4 warehousey facilities, main clients in manufacturing and retail distribution. The father-in-law was the sole listed owner. Her husband managed day-to-day operations at the largest facility. There was a general manager at each of the other 3. "What about the building in Gahana?" I asked. She looked at me. "The one they use for overflow storage. Does his father own that building outright, or does he lease it?" I don't know. I think they lease it. Do you know from whom?" She shook her head. I got up and refilled my coffee. Here is something I should explain, because it matters, and because my daughter didn't fully understand it until later, and I want to be clear so that anyone listening doesn't find themselves confused, the way some people do. 22 years ago, before my daughter had even finished college, I helped my late husband purchase a small industrial property in Gahana. It wasn't glamorous. It was a squat concrete building on about 1.5 acres, originally used by a print shop that had gone under. My husband had an eye for undervalued real estate, and I had the financial background to structure the purchase sensibly. We bought it, cleaned it up, and leased it out. My husband passed away 11 years ago. The property passed to me. I'd had it leased to various tenants over the years. A small auto parts distributor, a food service equipment company, and then about 6 years ago, my son-in-law's father approached me through a commercial real estate broker about leasing it for overflow warehousing. I had no idea at the time that my daughter would end up married to this man's son. She had only been dating him for a few months when the lease was signed. It seemed like a coincidence. I kept it as a coincidence. I didn't mention it to anyone, including my daughter. Not because I was hiding it, but because it simply didn't feel relevant. It was a business transaction. He paid his rent on time. That was the extent of our relationship, as far as he knew. As far as he knew, The property was managed by a leasing company out of Dublin. That was true. I'd used a property management firm for years, and the lease agreement listed the management company as the point of contact. My name appeared on the original deed, on the lease itself, and on every renewal. But I had no reason to believe my son-in-law's father had ever looked that closely. Why would he? The rent was auto-drafted every month, and the management company handled any maintenance requests. He had been operating out of my building for 6 years without knowing I owned it. I sat back down at my kitchen table with my coffee. "I need you to send me those photos again," I said. "The loan documents." She did. I looked at them carefully, the way I used to look at tax returns when something felt off. Both loans had been taken out through an online lending platform, the kind that processes applications quickly and with minimal paperwork. One was for $40,000. One was for $22,000. My daughter's name was listed as co-borrower on both. Her social security number, her signature, or something that was meant to look like it. She had never seen either of these documents before the day she found them on the home computer. "I need to make some calls," I said. "Don't call him. Don't call his father. Don't call a lawyer yet. Just give me until this weekend." She looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 8 years old, and I told her I would handle something, like she wasn't sure if she should believe me, but she was going to anyway because she didn't have another option. "Okay," she said. "My first call was to a private investigator I had used once before, years ago, when I suspected a contractor had overbilled my husband's estate. He was thorough and discreet, and he owed me a favor, or at least he always said he did. I told him what I needed. I gave him the names, the business name, the loan document details. I told him I wanted to know about any other financial accounts or credit instruments opened in my daughter's name in the past 3 years. I told him I wanted to know about the financial condition of the Westerville facility specifically. I told him I needed it in 5 days. He called me back in 4. There were not 2 loans, there were 4. The other 2 were business credit cards, both opened in the name of a limited liability company that my son-in-law had registered quietly 18 months ago that listed my daughter as a 50% owner. She had never agreed to this. She didn't know the LLC existed, but her name and social security number were on it, and the cards had been used. About $60,000 across both of them for expenses that appeared to be personal and business mixed together in ways that would be difficult to untangle. Her credit score, which had been excellent when she married him, had dropped 41 points in the past year. The Westerville facility was behind on 2 vendor contracts and had lost its largest client, a regional grocery distributor, 4 months ago. The father-in-law's business was not struggling due to a contract dispute. It was failing. Slowly, quietly, and in ways that had been papered over with borrowed money, some of it borrowed in my daughter's name. I sat with all of that for one evening. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet after my daughter and the baby were asleep, and I read through everything the investigator had given me, and I let myself feel what I felt, which was a cold, focused kind of anger. Not the hot kind. The hot kind burns itself out. The cold kind is useful. Then I wrote some emails. The first was to my property management company in Dublin, with instructions to prepare a notice of lease review. The lease on the Gargana property was up for renewal in 60 days. I had been planning to renew it without incident. That plan had changed. The second was to an attorney I had known for 20 years, a woman who handled both civil litigation and family law in Columbus. I laid out the situation in plain terms. I attached the documents the investigator had provided. I asked her to review them and advise me on both the civil fraud angle and the family law implications for my daughter. The third was to my daughter. 2 sentences. I told her that I had found what I expected to find, and that I needed her to trust me for a few more days. The attorney called me the next morning. She confirmed what I already knew. The use of my daughter's identity to open credit accounts without her knowledge or consent was textbook financial fraud. The forged signatures on the loan documents were a separate criminal exposure. She advised me that my daughter should file a dispute with all 3 credit bureaus immediately and put fraud alerts on her accounts, and that we should document everything before taking any other action. We did that on Thursday afternoon, my daughter and I, at my kitchen table. She was calmer than I expected. She had always been steadier than she gave herself credit for. On Friday, I called my son-in-law's father. I used the number I had for him from a family event the previous Christmas. I told him I wanted to meet. I told him it was about the Gahana property. I told him I thought we should speak in person before the lease review process began. There was a pause. A long one. What lease review process? He said. The one that will determine whether the lease on the Gahana facility is renewed, I said. I own the building. I thought you knew. Another pause. I'd like to meet Monday, I said. My attorney will be present. You're welcome to bring yours. He showed up Monday with my son-in-law. No attorney. I think he thought he could talk his way through it. He was the kind of man who had spent 30 years talking his way through things. My attorney and I were already seated when they arrived. I had the lease documents. I had the deed. I had the investigator's report. I had the credit bureau filings. I had the forged loan documents, copies, certified. I had printed everything and organized it in a single binder and placed a copy in front of each chair before they sat down. My son-in-law looked at the binder and then looked at me for the first time in 6 years, like he was actually seeing me. His father picked his up and opened it, and I watched his face move through about 4 different expressions in 10 seconds. My attorney spoke first. She explained the legal situation in the precise, unhurried way she had, the fraudulent credit accounts, the forged signatures, the LLC formed without my daughter's knowledge, the documentation we had prepared. She explained that we had not yet involved law enforcement, but that this was a decision that remained open. My son-in-law's father started to say something about a misunderstanding. My attorney let him finish. Then she said that the evidence of intent was substantial and that the term misunderstanding was not one she would recommend leaning on. I looked at my son-in-law. He was looking at the table. I want 2 things, I said, and then this meeting is over. I told him that my daughter would receive a settlement that fully compensated her for the financial damage done to her credit and her financial standing, including funds sufficient to secure her own housing and support herself and her daughter during any transition period, and that this would be documented in the divorce proceedings her attorney would be initiating that week. Then I told his father that the Gagana lease would not be renewed. You have 60 days to vacate, I said. If you'd like a referral for another property, I won't be providing one. His father looked at me the way people look when they've just realized the flaw is not where they thought it was. You're going to destroy my business, he said. I'm going to decline to renew a lease, I said. What happens to your business is a result of the decisions you made, not decisions I made. We were done in 45 minutes. My daughter was in my driveway when I got home. She was sitting on the porch steps with the baby in her lap, both of them in the thin autumn sun. She stood up when she saw my car. I walked up to the porch and I told her what had happened, not all of it. The details would come out through her attorney over the following weeks. But enough. I told her what they had done with her name and her credit. I told her about the LLC. I told her about the loans. She sat back down on the step. She was quiet for a long time. You owned the building, she finally said. For 22 years, I said. You never told me. It never seemed like your problem, I said. And then when it became your problem, I needed it to be a surprise. She laughed a little. The kind of laugh that comes out when something is both terrible and absurd. I sat down next to her on the step, and my granddaughter climbed into the space between us with a plastic ring toy and began narrating something to herself in the language that 14-month-olds use that only they understand. In the months that followed, my daughter's attorney handled the divorce proceedings. The settlement was fair, more than fair, given the documentation we had. My son-in-law did not contest it. His father's business did not survive the loss of the Gagana space combined with the loss of the grocery distributor contract. But that was a story for another family to deal with. My daughter moved into a rental house in Clintonville in January, a 2-bedroom with a yard for when the baby got old enough to run around in it. She's back to full-time at the hospital. She has started taking evening classes. She has a credit score that is, at last count, healthier than it has been in 3 years. She calls me most mornings on her way into work. We talk about the baby, about her classes, about nothing in particular. Last week she told me that one of her patients had asked how she stayed so calm during a difficult treatment, and she'd said without thinking, "My mother taught me that quiet is not the same as weak." I don't know if I ever said those exact words, but I'll take them. My granddaughter is learning to stack things and knock them down. She has discovered that the knocking down is the best part. Every time the tower falls, she looks up with the purest expression of delight, like this is the funniest thing that has ever happened, and she cannot believe her luck. I think about that sometimes. How something has to come down before there's room to build it better. My granddaughter doesn't know any of this yet. She's too young. Right now her whole world is stacking rings and eating crackers and laughing when the cat walks across the kitchen floor. But someday she'll be old enough to understand what happened in her first year of life. And I've thought about what I'll tell her when that day comes. I'll tell her that what happened to her mother was not bad luck. It was the result of choices made by people who believed that being loud and confident and in control of the room was the same thing as actually having power. Her father and his father had spent years confusing those two things. They built an image. They never built a foundation. And when the foundation turned out to belong to someone else, the image came down with it. That's not fate. That's cause and effect. You don't get to borrow your way through life on someone else's name and someone else's credit and walk away clean. The math always catches up. What I want her to understand, what I hope she watches her mother live, year by year, and absorbs without even realizing it, is that the 3 things that actually protect you in this life have nothing to do with how much noise you make. The first is your character, not your reputation. Your character. Your reputation is what people say about you when you're in the room. Your character is what you do when no one is watching, when there's no audience, when it would be very easy to cut a corner and no one would ever know. My daughter found those loan documents on a Tuesday night, and she didn't blow up, didn't confront anyone, didn't post anything anywhere. She took photos, and she waited, and she trusted me. That kind of steadiness comes from somewhere deep. It's built over years of small, quiet decisions to do the right thing even when the wrong thing is easier. The second is your mind. Not just being smart, being the kind of person who pays attention, who learns the things that seem boring but matter, who doesn't outsource their understanding of their own situation to someone else. I spent 34 years as a CPA. I knew what forged signatures on loan documents looked like. I knew how to read a lease. I knew that knowledge, held quietly, is worth more than any title or any office. I never stopped learning, even after I retired, even after my husband died, even after my life got smaller and quieter than I expected. That knowledge was sitting there in the back of my mind for 22 years, waiting for the one moment when it would matter more than anything else. The third is the will to keep going when everything in you wants to stop. My daughter sat on my porch steps in November with a 14-month-old on her lap and a divorce ahead of her and a credit report that had been quietly dismantled by someone she had trusted completely. And she looked at me and she asked what to do next. Not how did this happen, not why did he do this. What do we do next? That's not something you're born with. That's something you build. I think about what my granddaughter will be someday. I think about the tower she knocks down and rebuilds, every single time, with absolute delight. Like falling is just part of the process. Like starting over is not a defeat, but an invitation. She already knows more than she realizes.